The air inside the plywood briefing room at Bagram Airfield was heavy with diesel fumes and the bitter smell of old coffee. A portable heater hummed in the corner, its low vibration mixing with the steady thump of rotors outside. Kara Dawson stood at the back of the room, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed straight ahead. The lieutenant colonel at the front spoke evenly about risk mitigation and the importance of physical capability, explaining why women under 130 pounds had no place clearing compounds in Helmand province. His tone was matter-of-fact, but every word landed like a slow bruise. Master Sergeant Cole Masters stood near the mapboard, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Sergeant First Class Palmer jotted notes on his pad, focused but silent. Cortez leaned against a table, chewing on a pen, the faintest smirk playing at the edge of his mouth. Kara could feel their skepticism like static in the air. They didn't need to say anything. She knew what they thought. She wasn't built like them, didn't move like them, and didn't fit the image they had of a Special Forces medic. She kept her breathing even, and her shoulders loose the way her father had taught her, letting the noise around her fade until it was just rhythm and control. Outside, the early morning light pressed through the dusty window panes. The Afghan air was cold and dry. Carrying the metallic scent of jet fuel, Kara shifted her weight slightly. Her boots creaking against the plywood floor, she reminded herself that she had already passed everything that mattered. The assessments, the medical tests, the qualification course. She had earned her long tab, the same way every man in that room had, through pain and persistence. Let them doubt. That didn't change the truth of what she could do. The lieutenant colonel finished his remarks, his voice fading into the low rumble of a departing CH-47 Chinook. The sound built until it filled the room, dust shaking loose from the ceiling. Kara watched through the open doorway as the helicopter lifted into the pale gray sky, its twin rotors slicing through the dawn. She felt the pull in her chest that came every time she saw one leave for a mission. She thought about the years it took to get here, the cost of every step, and the simple fact that she had no intention of backing down now. Kara Dawson grew up in Missoula, Montana, where smoke from summer wildfires mixed with the sharp scent of pine. Her father, Simon Dawson, was a smoke jumper for the U.S. Forest Service. He spent his life parachuting into fire, cutting lines through burning timber with nothing but grit and lungs full of smoke. When he was home, he trained like the mountains, demanded something from him, and he made sure his daughter understood the same rule. He filled an old canvas rucksack with sandbags, strapped it to her shoulders, and took her hiking up the ridges behind their house until her legs trembled. He told her that quitters die in the mountains, that endurance meant more than size, and that fear only mattered if you let it stop you. She listened because he never talked about courage. He showed it. Her mother, Dr. Elise Dawson, lived in a different kind of chaos. She worked trauma nights at St. Patrick Hospital, moving through blood and light like it was another language. Kara would sit in her mother's study after school, the air thick with antiseptic and the faint hum of hospital monitors. Elise taught her how to suture pigskin, place IV lines, and recognize the subtle rhythm between panic and control. She would say that hands remember what the mind forgets. So Kara practiced until her fingers blistered. While her father built endurance, her mother built precision. Together they taught her that survival was not luck. It was training, repetition, and will. By the time Kara turned 19, she knew she wasn't meant for a quiet life. She enlisted in the Army and went straight into the 68 Watts Combat Medic course at Fort Sam Houston, learning to treat wounds under pressure and move fast when seconds counted. Her instructors said she had an unnatural calm, a steadiness that made her seem older than she was. After graduation, she volunteered for Special Forces assessment and selection. The process broke most who tried long days of ruck marches. Navigation and exhaustion peeled people down to their core. Kara kept moving. When others stopped, she took another step, At Fort Liberty, she began the 2-year Special Forces qualification course, the 18D medical pipeline. It was long, punishing, and unforgiving. She spent months mastering trauma care, wilderness medicine, and combat rescue. While carrying a rucksack that left scars across her shoulders, she earned her long tab through sweat and silence. Finishing near the top of her class, when she walked out of that gate for the first time with her 18D patch, she didn't feel proud so much as prepared. Every bruise, every blister, every long night in the field had built her into something stronger than fear. She didn't think of herself as special. She just knew she was ready for whatever came next. Kara Dawson's story began in Missoula, Montana, where the summers burned with the smell of pine sap and wildfire smoke. Her father, Simon Dawson, was a smoke jumper with the U.S. Forest Service, the kind of man who ran toward fire when everyone else ran away. He taught Kara that endurance wasn't optional. It was survival. On weekends, he took her into the mountains with a rucksack full of sandbags heavier than she was. The trails were steep, the air thin, and every step left her lungs raw. When she stumbled, he only said that quitters die in the mountains. It wasn't cruelty. It was love delivered through grit and expectation. By the time she was 15, she understood that pain wasn't an obstacle. It was a teacher. Her mother, Dr. Elise Dawson, was a trauma surgeon at St. Patrick Hospital. Her world smelled of antiseptic, latex, and adrenaline. Kara spent her evenings in the hospital break room, tracing anatomy charts, while her mother finished rounds. At home, Elise turned the kitchen table into a classroom, teaching her how to place IVs, pack wounds, and tie sutures into neat, tight knots on pieces of pigskin. She said that panic is what kills people, not injuries. The lesson was clear: precision saves lives, but calm under pressure keeps you alive long enough to use it. Between her parents, Kara learned 2 languages, strength and control, and together they shaped her into someone who didn't fold when things got hard. When she turned 19, she enlisted in the Army. The 68 Watts Combat Medic course at Fort Sam Houston felt like a second home. She thrived in the pressure, learning to treat burns, amputations, and gunshot wounds under fire. She graduated near the top of her class and immediately volunteered for Special Forces assessment and selection. The days blurred together into ruck marches, land navigation, and exhaustion so deep it felt physical. Many dropped. Kara didn't. She moved quietly, one foot after another, refusing to stop because stopping wasn't an option. At Fort Liberty, she entered the Special Forces qualification course for the 18D Medical Sergeant pipeline. 2 years of relentless training followed trauma labs, field clinics, and combat simulations that tested every limit. She learned to improvise care with nothing but gauze and grit, to stay calm under chaos, to keep moving, even when her body wanted to quit. When she finally earned her long tab and that green beret, she didn't celebrate. She just stood there, shoulders bruised and hands scarred, knowing that everything in her life had led to that moment. Every hike, every suture, every ounce of pain had built her into something solid. She was ready, not because she was fearless, but because she had already been through her own kind of fire. The night at the forward operating base was still and cold, the kind of quiet that made every sound sharper. Inside her tent, the light from a red lens headlamp cast long shadows across the canvas walls. Kara Dawson sat cross-legged on her cot, her aid bag open in front of her. One by one, she checked each item. Cat tourniquets stacked in the outer pocket. ARS, 14-gauge decompression needles sealed and sterile. TXA vials secured with tape. Combat gauze folded tight. Her fingers moved with practiced rhythm, the motions smooth and unhurried. She didn't do it out of fear. It was habit, a ritual she trusted more than sleep. Outside, the generator hummed, steady as breathing, somewhere beyond the wire. A helicopter lifted off, its rotors fading into the black sky. The air inside the tent smelled like dust, gun oil, and canvas. Kara closed her eyes and began again, running through each procedure by touch alone. Tourniquet placement, chest seal, needle decompression. Her hands knew the sequence, as well as her heartbeat. She practiced until muscle memory took over. Until thinking was unnecessary, her father's voice drifted through her mind, steady as ever, saying that mountains don't care if you're tired. Then her mother's quieter tone, reminding her that panic kills faster than bullets. Together, those voices became her anchor. When she finished, she reached for her small green notebook. The pages were filled with notes, checklists, fragments of thought from long deployments. Tonight she wrote a single line: don't argue. Don't explain. Just be ready. She closed the book and set it beside her rifle. The base was silent now, except for the wind brushing against the tent. Kara sat there in the dark for a while, breathing slow and steady, her mind already beyond the walls around her. She didn't know when the next mission would come, only that it would, and when it did, she would be ready. The mission was supposed to be simple: a standard night raid in Sangin Valley, capture a target, and extract before dawn. The team lifted off in two UH-60 Blackhawks under a moonless sky, their rotor blades cutting through the wind like clockwork. Kara stayed back at the forward operating base, headset pressed tight against her ear, listening to the steady rhythm of radio chatter. It was quiet at first, just coded reports and coordinates. She sat by her desk under red light. LP beside her, waiting. The air smelled like dust and coffee. Then the radio cracked, sharp and broken, followed by gunfire that drowned everything else. The calm vanished in seconds. Kara straightened, adjusting the comm's volume as shouts bled through static. Automatic weapons fire echoed in the background. The sound of chaos carried even through the distance between them. She recognized Master Sergeant Master's voice, tight and clipped, giving position updates between bursts of sound. His tone told her everything. 2 men were down. Palmer had a gunshot wound to the leg with an arterial bleed. Cortez had taken shrapnel from an RPG blast and wasn't responding. The team was pinned, trading fire from multiple angles. The compound walls lighting up with muzzle flashes. Kara gripped the edge of the table, listening as Masters requested medevac. The response came back fast. LZ still hot. No birds inbound until suppression achieved. Kara's stomach turned cold, but her voice stayed steady when she spoke into the mic, confirming she was suiting up. She grabbed her aid bag and rifle, sprinted across the tarmac toward the waiting Black Hawk. The crew chief waved her in. Inside, the cabin thumped with noise. She buckled her harness and slipped on her headset. The pilot called out time to target. 11 minutes. The helicopter banked hard, rotors thundering against the thin Afghan air. The crew loaded extra ammo cans, the smell of hydraulic fluid and gun oil filling the compartment. Outside, tracers streaked across the horizon, green and red lines vanishing into the dark. Kara steadied her breathing, feeling her pulse sink with the rhythm of the blades. Fear tried to climb up her spine, but training pushed it down. She thought of every drill, every late night in the field, every reason she had to be there. When the Black Hawk flared over the compound, the crew chief turned, shouted her, "Go signal," over the roar. She wrapped her gloved hands around the fast rope and stepped out into the downdraft. The wind tore at her uniform, dust exploding upward as she slid down. Boots hitting hard-packed earth. Bullets cracked against the wall nearby, bits of mud spraying her face. She moved low, eyes scanning through the haze, and heart pounding, but her mind clear. The world around her was chaos. Inside, she was steady. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The dust hit her first. It stung her eyes and coated her tongue with grit as the rotor wash faded and the UH-60 lifted back into the night. The air smelled of gunpowder, diesel, and blood. Kara Dawson crouched low against a mud wall. Her M4A1 tucked tight against her chest as rounds cracked overhead. Tracer fire cut through the darkness like lightning. The radio on her shoulder hissed with short, clipped bursts of comms, each voice urgent and strained. Her breathing was steady, but her pulse drummed in her throat. She scanned through the smoke, listening for the sound she knew too well, a man gasping where he shouldn't be. She spotted Palmer first, sprawled against the wall 20 feet ahead. His leg was soaked in blood, the tourniquet above his knee already dark and loose. She crawled forward, keeping her body low, rounds striking the dirt just inches away. Sliding to his side, she pulled his hand from the wound and tore the tourniquet free. Too low. No pressure. She grabbed a new cat from her vest, looped it high near the groin, and twisted until the bleeding stopped. She checked for a distal pulse. None. Good. His skin was gray, his breath shallow. She found a vein, started a saline lock, and pushed 1 gram of tranexamic acid. Every movement was practiced. No wasted motion. She spoke into her mic, voice calm, requesting cover fire and an extraction point while her hands never stopped moving. A sharp burst of automatic fire ripped through the air, sending dust into her face. Kara ducked lower, turned her head, and caught sight of Cortez a few meters away, half conscious and barely breathing. His chest lifted unevenly, each inhale tighter than the last. She crawled to him, shielding her head as rounds struck the wall above. His helmet was cracked, blood matting his hair, and there was swelling along his left rib cage. Tension pneumothorax. She rolled him gently onto his side, cleared his airway, then pressed her fingers along the ribs until she found the bulge, 5th intercostal space, mid-axillary line. She pulled a 3.25-inch ARS 14-gauge needle from her kit, steadied her hand, and drove it through the chest wall. A sharp hiss of air escaped, followed by a long, shaky breath. She sealed the site with a high-fin chest seal, her gloves slick with sweat and blood. Cortez's breathing steadied, shallow, but even rounds still snapped overhead, biting into the wall behind her. Kara keyed her radio, voice low but firm, ordering 2 teammates to prepare a litter. She double-checked Palmer's tourniquet, confirmed pulse and breathing, then helped lift both casualties toward the extraction zone. The medevac bird roared back into the valley, miniguns spitting fire across the ridgeline. Under the whine of rotors and the heat of gunfire, she helped load them aboard, securing IV lines and gear as the crew chief pulled her in. Inside the helicopter, the cabin shook like a living thing. Kara kept her hand pressed to Palmer's pulse, counting beats against her fingertips. Cortez's chest rose and fell beneath her other hand. 11 minutes to Camp Bastion. The pilot's voice came through her headset, steady, professional, a sound she barely heard. Her world had narrowed to pulse, breath, and seconds. The blades above thundered against the dark sky as she watched both men stabilize. Fear had no place here. There was only focus, movement, and the quiet certainty that she had done everything she was trained to do. 2 days after the firefight, Kara Dawson stepped off the transport helicopter at Bagram Airfield. Dust still clung to her uniform, and the smell of jet fuel and metal hung in the air. Her shoulders ached from carrying gear she had refused to let anyone else touch. She crossed the tarmac toward the Tactical Operations Center, the noise of engines and shouting fading into background static. Master Sergeant Cole Masters waited outside, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was even almost casual. From now on, She would serve as the team's primary medic. No restrictions. That was all he said. No praise. No apology. But in the silence that followed, she saw it in his eyes. He knew exactly what she had done. And for him, that acknowledgement was enough. Later that night, Kara sat alone in the briefing room. The radio hummed softly beside her, the same one she'd clung to during the fight in Sangin. Her tablet buzzed with a message from Sergeant Cortez. The words were short and awkward, thanking her for saving his life and admitting he had been wrong. She read it once, then deleted it. Validation didn't come from their words. It came from knowing that when the team needed her most, she had delivered. The rest didn't matter. Over the next months, Kara ran every medical operation the ODA conducted. Her movements became the rhythm the team trusted. Under fire, her voice carried calm authority. On long convoys or village patrols, she was the quiet constant in the chaos. The one everyone looked to when things went wrong. No one questioned her anymore. The doubt had disappeared, replaced by reliance. When the deployment ended, Kara flew home with the same gear she had brought into country, now worn and stained with memory. During a small ceremony on base, she received an Army Commendation Medal with a V device for valor and a combat medical badge. She stood at attention, the weight of the medal cool against her chest, and felt something like peace. She never needed an apology. She only needed them to remember what happened when they underestimated her. The morning light over Bagram airfield was soft and pale, stretching across the mountains and the cracked concrete of the tarmac. The wind moved dust across the ground in thin waves, and the air was quiet for the first time in days. Kara Dawson walked across the runway with her gear slung over her shoulder. Her uniform still stained from the desert. The noise of helicopters and gunfire was gone now, replaced by the steady hum of wind against metal. Her steps were slow, steady, unhurried. Each one carried the weight of the months behind her and the calm certainty that she had done her job when it mattered most. The war hadn't changed her. It had revealed her. Sometimes strength isn't measured in size or muscle. It's measured in willpower, preparation, and courage when the world catches fire around you. Kara's story isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about being ready when it counts. She never shouted to be noticed or demanded respect. She just waited for the moment when skill and grit would matter more than opinion. And then she delivered. That's the quiet kind of strength that defines true professionals, the kind that doesn't need validation because the work speaks louder than words ever could. There are heroes like Kara everywhere. Soldiers, medics, firefighters, teachers, parents, people who keep going long after others stop, people who carry the load, stay calm in the storm, and push through when no one is watching. They may not make headlines, but they make the world work. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone told you that you couldn't do something, remember Kara Dawson. She didn't argue, she acted. If this story moved you, take a second to share it or leave a comment about someone who inspired you to keep going when things got hard. Subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that remind us what quiet courage looks like. Because some heroes never ask to be remembered, they just make sure no one forgets what they did.